Hi, I'm Garnbreak1, and this is Midgardia's Cool Crowdfunding Show. I'm here today with Mason. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. So, while you're here to
So,
tell us about Monster Wranglers, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
yeah, so we're doing a Kickstarter for Monster Wrangler, which is a monster training tabletop role-playing game. Uh, if you're not familiar with role-playing games, that just means one person's the GM. They're kind of running the show, controlling the other characters, the monsters, kind of putting together a rough story for the players to fumble through and go completely off script with. And the everyone else is taking the role of Wranglers, who are people that train monsters. So it's kind of got a Pokemon, Digimon, Monster Rancher sort of feel to it, but kind of doing its own thing with its own monsters. So, we don't get sued.
I love not getting sued. It's one of my
Yeah, it's
favorite
it's a good place
pastimes.
to be.
Yeah. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about the world of Monster Wrangler to start off with?
Alright, so it takes place in the Chosu region, which is just kind of the name we came up for, kind of a homage to Pokemon calling it a region. But yeah, it's got a number of different kingdoms and nations and such. Kind of the history goes back about 70 years for all intents purposes when uh, one of the nations kind of pulled up some old construct monsters from the ocean and they rebuilt them and they kind of started working again. People were like, "Oh wow, that's kind of cool. We should probably give these things weapons and use them for mechanical soldiers." And they kind of people started researching these monsters and expanding upon the technology, and it was just this huge technological boom, and they did the whole empire across the continent try to control things that people tend to do sometimes, and they actually got stopped about halfway through by people that uh, just kind of came up with these ideas of, oh, these monsters that live out in the woods, maybe we should use them against these robot soldier things, and that worked out really well. So they managed to stop the empire long enough for it to just kind of collapse in on itself, and now we're a good 70 years down the road where monster wranglers kind of become this you know, uh, continent-wide pastime from, the pride and everything, and people being like, "Oh, we can train monsters. That's pretty cool. That's way better than being eaten by them." Uh, so, there's kind of a reason with the world and why people train monsters and why it's this really big social pastime thing. Like, why do we go watch monster fights instead of football? It's like, oh, because there's some background reasons for it, not just because it's cool, but it is cool. And then you've also got some, plot threads you can pull on there with, oh, this one organization wants to bring about the evil empire again. They're, the second wave baddies, and you've got other organizations that sprung up, like these monster training organizations that are all about, well, monsters are dangerous, so we're going to teach young people how to interact with monsters so they don't get eaten, and so they know how to train stuff. And it just kind of grew from that main point in a, we like to think, really organic kind of way.
Right on, right on. I also like not being eaten by monsters. It's my second favorite pastime, right behind not getting sued. So, why don't you tell me a little bit about the mechanics? Like, how does the average session go?
Well, mechanic wise, it's a D10 system. So we have attributes for the characters. Monsters and Wranglers work roughly the same mechanically up until when they don't. So you've got attributes, which are hardcore stats like your strength, your vitality, your speed. Then you've also got skills, which would be your persuasion, your melee weapons, etc. Each of those has a rank, generally 1 to 5 ish. When you make dice roll, you have an attribute, you have a skill. So with melee weapons, it'd be strength plus your melee weapon skill. You add those numbers together. That's how many dice you roll. Every 7 or higher is a success. Everything less than a 7 isn't a success. And then if you get a 10, you roll another dice. And if that's a 7 or higher, that's a success. And if it's a 10, then you roll another one and you keep exploding that way. Uh,
Nice.
and, then, and then there's various effects that change that. You need a 7 down to a 6 or up to a 8, depending upon difficulty and stuff. If you're trying to shoot at someone through a blanket of fog, you might need a 9 to hit, for instance.
Right on. I like that you got like two kind of levers to pull on for difficulty there.
Yeah, it works out pretty nice. And
Yeah.
then if you meet the difficulty, so for instance, if you're attacking a monster and it has defense 2, your difficulty is 2, you need at least 2 successes to hit. If you get more successes beyond that, those turn into raises, and then you can spend them for additional effects. So it might be if you hit him with a baseball bat, you can do more damage. Maybe you hit him in the knee instead, you trip them. So there's a mechanic for I did really, really well at this. What extra things do I get?
Nice. So I take it the monster versus human combat is totally doable in this system.
Absolutely. We've had playtest games where you've got your tournaments first off, and they're the more regulated ones generally. That's your kind of standard. Everyone's got a monster, they're going out. Sometimes you do double monsters, so it's two monsters fighting. We have mentioned that there are illicit tournaments where sometimes they'll just be like, "Hey, you're in here with a baseball bat, and good luck. There's a monster on the other side. Good luck with that." Those aren't really legal though. But yeah, once you're outside of a tournament format and you're kind of in the wilds, like if you want to run up and start attacking a monster alongside, your own monster, you can do that. If you want to have monsters ambush people where they're away from their monsters, that's a thing that can happen. The monsters and people work the same mechanically up to a point, so it's really easy to kind of swap in the targets in and out. It doesn't actually change how the game plays.
Right on. Yeah, because I know some other games inspired by Pokemon, it gets real janky if you try to attack a monster
Yep.
as a person.
Yep. And I mean, way back in the day when we were in high school after Pokemon came out, we were cobbling together really loose framework Pokemon games where it'd be like, all right, well, I want to attack that guy with my baseball bat. And you'd be like, okay, well, hold on, we need to figure out how that works because you don't have any abilities or powers or anything. So we really wanted to make sure that, if you absolutely wanted to play as a character that doesn't have any monsters, you still have stuff you can do in a game. You might be missing the point a little bit, but you can still do it.
You're a monster puncher. It's cool. Don't worry about
Yeah. Yeah. That one guy that shows up, he's like, no, I just have a sword. We're cool.
it. Ah, yes, the fighter player.
Yeah, it also means that if you really, really want to get weird with it, you could stage like a game before everyone became monster wranglers and just have people out in the wild, like doing a more traditional D&D sort of thing, where like monsters are enemies and you've got weapons and good luck with it.
Yeah, yeah. If you're playing like the first monster Wranglers in some primordial time or something like that.
Yeah.
I have a question. This is a slight tangent, but
All right.
is the artwork supposed to be like very Dinotopia feeling? Like, is that the vibe you were going for with it?
That was a happy accident.
All right,
We've we've essentially I've got one artist that I worked with when I was at Weird Miniatures with her, Alyssa Menold, and she's amazing. And I was just kind of like, well, we're looking to get a monster done, and this is kind of what the description's like. And she put one together, and I was like, oh my god, that's amazing. And that pretty much cemented the art style for everything going forward.
nice. Yeah, because like everybody I've showed this to, um, and yeah, of course me, it's just like that looks like Dinotopia, which is.
Yep, we're kind of not noticing it until one of our playtesters mentioned it. We're like, oh yeah, 100%, that makes sense.
All right, I'm glad to see that that's a consistent impression, not just my little sphere. So this is another tangent, but it's more setting related. What stops you from capturing a person?
So essentially, when you capture a monster, quote unquote, uh, you do a wrangle check, and it's kind of difficult. Um, but if you succeed, then the monster becomes one of your bonded monsters, and there's a limit to the number of bonded monsters you can have based on your stats and such. And then the monster like literally follows you around. Like we don't have any Pokeball technology that makes people disappear. Like if you have a giant Geladon, which is this mammoth-like creature that spews ice everywhere, like you are taking that thing for walks during the day, and it's hanging out the entire time. If it gets bored, we have a mischief check mechanic where monsters can go off and cause trouble. Uh, so we really wanted to make sure that you are with your monsters, and it's not just, oh, we're in combat, let's bust these guys out. Like they are part of the journey.
So you would not want to do that to a fellow human being.
I mean, you could try, but I mean, it's basically like trying to train a human using dog training techniques. You're like, all right, now sit. And they're like, I mean, I'm going to sit, but I'm not doing it because you're telling me to.
Oh, so like training a cat.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much impossible.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about the types?
All right. So let me pull up a list here so I don't misremember anything. But yeah, we've got a bunch of different types for monsters. Uh, in Monster Wrangler, types are essentially just shorthand for this is how the monster attacks. So we have like the claw type, electric type, uh, tendril type, and that's essentially just ways we can group the various techniques, which is techniques that monsters use to attack. So, for instance, The cold type has a bunch of cold attacks that can freeze people, slow them down, etc. The claw type has a lot of attacks that do bleeding. So you hit someone with claw attack, generally speaking, they're gonna walk away losing blood off of it. Poison type poisons people, obviously. Uh, and every monster is essentially made up of two of these types. So that gives us a large variety of different techniques to pull through. It means that, you know, the monsters tend to be very unique in terms of what they can use. One cold monster might be cold and claw, in which case they're freezing you, they're making you bleed. Another one might be cold and tendril, in which case they're wrapping you up in their tendrils, kind of restricting your movement while also freezing you. So it's a good way of letting us divide the attacks out in ways that keep monsters from all kind of funneling down the same path and being the same thing.
Right. Right on. And are there complicated charts of type weaknesses?
There are not actually. So there are has written there aren't any weaknesses per se. So if you hit a plant with fire, it just does damage. They catch on fire, they're burning, because that's what fire attacks tend to do. But they don't take any extra damage and stuff. Where the resistances and everything come in is on the monster level. So, for instance, construct monsters are machines, so they're immune to being bleeding. They can't be poisoned. So, if you have a monster like a Pancheon that is claw and poison types, so they tend to make the opponents bleed, they tend to poison them. Going by construct, that Pancheon's going to have a really rough day because all of a sudden, most of its secondary, I'm going to hurt you and kind of back off and let you bleed to death sort of strategy isn't working. So it's going to have to come up with different plans and kind of hit with the techniques that aren't hitting as hard. So there is kind of that thing in there, but it's not as binary as, oh, electric attacks do more damage than water monsters.
Right, right. And there's, what was it, six major types of monster or classifications?
Yeah, six different categories.
That's the one,
So you
yeah.
get Yeah, you've got your brute monsters. They're kind of your big beefcakey, I just punch things sort of things. You got your plants. They're plants. Constructs are machines. You've got scroungers. They're the really kind of fast, avoiding direct conflict, come at you sideways sort of guys. Uh, and you've got the beasts. They tend to be the very fast, kind of like your tigers, your lions and stuff. They get in there fast. They do damage. They get out. Um, and then you've got your uh, vermin, and they tend to be, your bug monsters. So
Right.
good number of status conditions coming out of them, generally speaking.
Right on, right on. You have, what is it, 36, 37 monsters in the book right now?
Yeah, I believe it's 36, six for each of the six, and then there's the example monster, which is your Magikarp level of kind of sucking, but it's in there and it's got stats. So if you want to play it, like you can absolutely play it.
And does this come with rules for creating your own monsters?
Yep, yep, we've got those in there. So if you want to um, have an idea and you're like, oh, this would be amazing, and it's not, but it's not actually in the book. Like we just kind of walk you through the process for making them. You can when you get down to the monster traits, you can pull from other monsters, kind of pick and choose ones that make sense. We'll talk you through the general sense of, well, you want to avoid this sort of thing because that'll horribly break the game, but this sort of stuff is cool. This is kind of the parameters you want to keep in. This is kind of the stat distributions you want. Brute monsters, you probably want more strength. Um, the vermin, you probably want more speed, etc.
Right on. I'm glad to hear that, because that is you want to create your weird dude.
Yeah, yeah. And we know that there are plenty of popular games out there that have monsters, and people might want to use those monsters in our game. And if they do it at home, they can't be sued. So that works out.
Yep, yep. Like that one monster taming game where you call monsters on your telephone to summon them to fight. That's the one
Yeah,
everybody's thinking of.
yeah, absolutely.
Denju Telefang. That's what it is. Everybody loves it.
Number one brand in America.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about the bonus expansions, which I am very excited for.
All right. So yeah, when we hit certain levels of stretch goals, we've essentially got some bonus expansions. Uh, and we're going to let the backers vote on these. So we don't know which one's coming up. It's just going to be a matter of whichever one people are more excited about. Uh, that'll add some monsters that type. It'll add a new type with different attacks and stuff. So, for instance, the chemical expel expansion that'll add amorph monsters, so oozes and stuff. It'll add some acid types, so a bunch of acid attacks in the game. And then those also come with a class. Every type has a class, and then there are some classes that aren't associated with any type. So, like I just did an update for the Brawler class, which deals with brute monsters. And each of these will add one, so there'll be a Wrangler class that deals with amorphs with chemical spill expansion. And then there's an adventure that kind of introduces them to the game. So if you want to have them involved in the game right off the bat, that's perfectly fine. If you want to kind of do an adventure to, unlock them for your players, you can do that too. Or if you just want one that kind of focuses on amorphs a little bit more, like that's 100% there too. Pre-gen adventures are great for getting people into the game. We've got two of them in the core book, but extra ones are always great. So yeah, we have chemical spill that introduced amorphs and acid kind of attacks. The deep blue expansion will be aqua monsters, so kind of the swimmers. We left those out of the base game just because swimmers on land is a little bit awkward, but we got ideas for making that work. That adds the water type, so you can hydroblast stuff from now until next Tuesday. The Night Terrors is what I'm really excited and looking forward to. That adds remnants, which are essentially undead monsters. So that adds your ghost, your kind of zombie sort of things, and the tear type, which is really great because it adds like another dimension. We have the psychic type in the game, but tear will come at it in a different way, and I'm really excited to see that. Nuclear dust adds atomic monsters, so if you want to desperately get radiation attacks in your game and turn things into nuclear wasteland, like we're 100% there. And Fossil Mania adds fossil monsters, which are kind of popular and stuff. You can deal with a lot of like really old dinosaur type monsters and kind of pick and choose. Dinosaurs just fun. And again, we kind of have a Dinotopia look, so there you go.
It
And
all
that
works
adds
out.
the rock type.
Yeah, it all comes together.
Yep,
I'm wearing my nuclear zero carbon T-shirt because I'm excited for
nice.
nuclear dust. So
Yeah, I think that'll be really fun.
yeah, so we've talked a lot about the monsters. Can you tell me a little bit about the other half of the title, the Wranglers?
Yeah, so every player takes the role of a Wrangler, which is someone who ostensibly trains monsters. Don't have to, but you probably should. Uh, when you make a Wrangler, you generally start as a juvenile. So we've got stats for that, and then you also have perks and flaws you can purchase for your character. Perks are things that make your character better. Flaws are things that make you worse and give you extra points you can spend elsewhere. One of the perks is the adult perk, which turns you an adult. So if you want to have like you want to be the one guy who is stuck babysitting all these juveniles running around, you can be that guy. If you guys want to do a campaign of just like adults managing your 9 to 5 while also monster wrangling on the side, like that's 100% an option. So we really want to get, because a lot of the games and media and stuff focuses on young trainers, but there are obviously older trainers and Pokemon, Digimon, that sort of stuff. So we really wanted to make sure we had both options available. Um, we've got classes for Wranglers, and those are very loosely based. They're essentially a collection of abilities dealing with a general theme. A lot of them, as I said, deal with a monster category. So brawlers deal with brutes and also melee damage. Hunters are kind of paired with beasts, but they're also the range damage class. And how it works is when you make a character, you get two abilities to choose from. Every class is a signature ability, and the first ability you choose from that class has to be that signature ability, which is kind of a way to gatekeep people from just running immediately towards the best thing ever, but also making sure that every class kind of has a base to build on. So, for instance, there's a breeder class, and the signature ability of that is the one that lets you breed monsters, and that ensures that all the abilities that enhance the breeding monsters are referencing an ability that the players actually have, which is kind of important.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the idea of running an all-adult campaign where you're 9 to 5ers battling on weekends in the hope that you can get out of this like soul-sucking job.
Yeah, it's essentially, you do your job as a lawyer or whatever, and then, you go down to the pub and have a quick monster fight and throw back some beers, and then, go to bed at 10 o'clock.
Are there any other elements of Monster Wrangler that you want to bring up that we haven't touched on yet?
So we have a bunch of items and equipment and such. There's a medic class that deals with medicine sprays. So you can purchase medicine sprays. They do things like your general, kind of a spray on healing. But there's also to extinguish people, or there's one if your characters can become pinned, like grappling, and there's essentially a spray on lubricant you can use. Uh, so there's a whole bunch of different things there. There are some a little bit off items, like one of the construct monsters is essentially a hologram. So you need a light projector to make it actually be able to manifest in the real world. And I think that's kind of some neat interactions there. You can also use it to make like a essentially holographic artwork and everything. But it was one of those items that came out and was pretty niche until someone's like, if we made a holographic monster, and then all of a sudden it became like the go-to. I'm a very rich person sort of status symbol.
Real good. I like that. The having a specific monster as a flex is ideal.
Oh yeah, We've got a really robust status system where essentially when you gain a status condition, you gain it at a certain number of ranks, and those go from 1 to 10. So you can be bleeding 1, bleeding 10, bleeding 5. Uh, so the bleeding status means that up until 1 through 6, you take 1 damage at the end of your turn. Not great. And then if you're 7 or higher, you take 2 points of damage. So you can actually be very, very bleeding. And it also means that if you have effects that reduce bleeding, excuse me, if you have effects that reduce bleeding, they can reduce it by an amount. So you might be like, oh, this guy's got bleeding 1. Uh, I ran up and bandaged him. Now he's not bleeding anymore. Or you could be like, okay, he's bleeding 10. You bandaged him for 2. He's bleeding 8. So he is better, but he is just spraying blood in every direction. And I think that adds a lot too, because you can then have attacks that are making things bleeding, and hitting an opponent with it multiple times actually has an effect instead of it just being a binary on off situation.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I can't get past the Tendril as a type. I love it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, tentacle attacks are some of the most fun things to write because you can essentially be like, oh, yeah, you hit them and drag them in close. Uh, there's one defensive ability where essentially the monster props itself up on its tendrils and rises up and gives them a defense boost because they're essentially fighting above everyone else.
It's over, Anakin. I am the high ground.
Right, exactly.
It's real. That's real good. Um, yeah, like I'm very excited for this. Both I and a lot of my friends and followers and stuff have played a lot of monster taming games in our time. In fact, I was watching somebody play Pokemon just last night. So yeah,
Yeah, I think it's honestly a really underdeveloped niche for how popular the genre is. Like, I mean, I've definitely, looked online and there are some monster training RPGs, but they really get bogged down in the rules, I think.
yeah,
Uh,
like
which is
the
surprising because the demographic tends to be, I mean, I know that we're aging, but it tends to be a younger demographic where you're sitting down with people that really enjoy like the Pokemon franchise, for instance. They're like, "Oh yeah, I like D&D, I like Pokemon, let's do D&D Pokemon." And then the answer to that is the most mechanically complex bag of rules that you can ever find. And it just, I mean, I'm a rules guy and I look at those things and my eyes glaze over. So we really wanted a system that was still had that mechanical depth, but was easier to get people into.
yeah, like there are certainly some slightly lighter ones coming out more recently, but the long standing ones are all like, what if we replicated every single element of the games? It's like, man,
Right.
that's
And we're at 20 plus years of games now. Like, that's a lot.
yeah, and like that's math meant to be done on a computer.
Exactly. There's a computer powering stuff in the background, and you don't really notice that until you have to do the math yourself.
Yeah, don't forget about stab and every type
Yep.
weakness and yeah, no, for sure. Uh, I'm very glad to to see this, and I want to wrangle some monsters, man.
Yeah, we're hoping it does really well. This is the sort of thing where we can very easily expand down in the future if it gets popular. You come out with a book and be like, oh, well, now we've got cosmic monsters from beyond space, and let's do that. It's a really great system for adventures. We have like 7 different nations. They're all kind of doing their own thing. So if you want to do a kind of survivalist thing in like a desert nation where you've got this, uh, kind of a civilizations on the coast, and then the interior is just really rough and mountainous. Like we've got that giant scorpions put in there. We've got giant scorpion monsters. If you want to do a more like civilized, sprawling metropolis sort of place, we've got one of those in the world. So we really wanted to. We were designing the world. We kind of did it from the ground up. Of we want to make sure there are good places for people to adventure, and we made sure that the human civilizations are civilizations, but they're also kind of like hugging the coasts and everything, so there's plenty of unexplored lands to get in trouble in.
I can't wait to run a vermin-centric city campaign.
Oh yeah, it'd be great. The vermin class is the trapper. So because these vermin generally don't want to get caught, so they make these traps and stuff, and you can do those in combat. So if you are a dedicated vermin trainer, you get this really interesting playstyle where you're setting down traps and then you're using your vermin to kind of either lure the opponent in by being like, "Oh, I'm a helpless little bug monster," or being really creepy and scaring them away. So has a class that adds a lot of like movement control and then traps for the punishing of that movement. So it's a really great class if you have time to set up.
That's awesome. Well, Mason, it's been wonderful talking to you, and this looks like a hell of a project. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We're looking forward to seeing how far we can go with it.
I hope you can go far enough to get all of the expansions, especially Nuclear Dust. I want it so badly.
That'd be amazing. Our artists are really, we got a hold of them. We're like, well, just so you know, like you might have to, we have some more work for you, and they are all just 100% on board. Like they are just amazing people.
Hell yeah. And for those of you watching this, there is a link below. Please go click it, please go back it, please vote for Nuclear Dust when that comes up.
Yeah, there's an expansion to make your own monster, or stretch goal to reward tier to make your own monster too. So if you have something you desperately want to see in the game and it's not copyrighted by someone else, then yeah, back that, get in the game. We'll put you in the core book and everything.
Nice. I wish I had 300 US dollars.
Yeah, yeah.
But I
Art's expensive.
it is it is so expensive. But hey, paying artists is good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Back the project. Yeah. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you much.